Hi, I'm Brian Rigobuto. I'm with the Coast Guard Auxiliary. I am a staff officer of public affairs for Division 5 in District 11 south of the Coast Guard Auxiliary. And I'm here today to talk to you about the Coast Guard Auxiliary, its history, and what it is we do. And maybe you might be interested in wanting to do the same thing and come join us. All right, so let's start by sharing. Here we go. And we got everything, share. All right, here we go. So let me click that and let's begin. So the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary is a part of the Department of Homeland Security. We are part of Team Coast Guard. We work very closely with the active duty and the reserve aspects of the Coast Guard. So let's start talking about who we are. Well, we're basically the nation's uniformed guardian volunteers. What we do is we save lives. Here's an example, one that I was involved with. We were out on patrol and we found these two gentlemen. They were 3 miles off the coast of Newport to the entrance of Newport Harbor. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon, and there was an offshore breeze, and the tide was going out and was pushing them further out into the ocean. And as you could see, they had no sails, and they had no rudder, and they had an ineffective paddle. We asked them if they would like a tow, and because we're volunteers, we're not military, we're not law enforcement. All we can do is offer. So we offered to tow them. They refused. And we would have to leave. I asked them, do you have any way to contact anybody to help pull you back to shore? And they said, no. And we go, oh. And then I pointed out to them that on the horizon, there was a barge coming in, being pushed by a tug, and that the captain of the tug could not possibly see them, and he was going to be there in about 5 minutes. Would they going to be able to move their boat out of the way? They then wisely changed their mind and asked for us to tow them. At the same time, the captain on the tug on the radio wanted to know why we were in his way, and we had to explain that we were pulling a small little sailboat out of the way so he could get by without running into them. And so first thing we did was we had to pass them life jackets because they didn't have any life jackets. They really didn't have any safety equipment at all. And then we got them under tow with about 5 minutes to spare and got them to safety. That's the kind of things we do. We do them on the lakes, we do that on the rivers, and we do that in the oceans. Now, we also assist the active duty Coast Guard in their training. Some of our members are qualified to actually train the active duty. Some of us actually train with them. We provide the platform for them to practice on, so they stay sharp to help save lives. So we teach safe boating classes, which is one of the things that I enjoy doing. Half of the class is made up of people who are got into trouble with the law and they had to take a safe boating class because they did something wrong. But in the state of California now, if you're not aware of it, everybody who's under the age of 60 this year has to have operator's card to be able to operate a boat, a significant size boat, something that has 15 horsepower or more, or is over 20 feet. So if you guys operate boats and you don't have your boating card, then you need to take one of our safe boating classes. I only do them in person. I don't like doing them online because you really don't learn as many things as you need to learn. We do vessel safety checks. Doing a vessel safety check, we make sure that you have all the safety equipment required. We recommend things that you should do for your boat. And we use that as an opportunity to teach you about other safe boating habits on your vessel. And when you pass, you get a nice little sticker. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. It's not law enforcement. It's merely a courtesy vessel check. Public affairs. That's something I like doing, is public affairs, like what I'm doing tonight, right now. There I am at the Bart Hall Boat Show with my friend Can the Toucan. And we're talking to some young kids about safe boating. They much prefer to talk to Can than they do to me. So that's why I use that to get the message across about wearing life jackets with whistles. We do surface patrols. We have several different styles of patrols. We have security patrols. We have, like over here, safety patrols. If you're in a boat parade, we help to control traffic in boat parades as well. We also have air patrols. My father, when he was in the auxiliary, he had an airplane and he was a pilot. And what he loved doing was going out and finding people who were lost. Now, you might say, oh, I would love to be able to be in an airplane and help look for lost people on the ocean or in the lakes, but I'm not a pilot. Well, you don't have to be a pilot to play on other people's airplanes. You can be what's called an aircrew observer. They need to have two people, a pilot and an observer. The observer's job is to man the radio and to help look for the people who are in distress. Okay, what else we do is we have fun. That's right. So we do fun things, bowling, activities, going to shows, all kinds of different things, having fun at a park, whatever. Okay, now how did this all get started? Well, in 1934, Malcolm Stewart Boylan, right here in Southern California, he was the script writer. Basically, he was the script doctor for the movies. And he was also an enthusiastic boat owner, and he became the Commodore of the Screenwriters Yacht Club. Well, they were going to go to Catalina Island on all of their boats, but he was concerned about the safety of the boats. So he asked the Coast Guard if they would inspect all of the Yacht Club's boats. And Lieutenant Francis Pollard said, yeah, I'll do that. And so they inspected the vessels. They all passed. And then they invited the lieutenant to go with them over to Catalina Island to spend the day. He did. Boylan and Lieutenant Francis had a good time. They got to know each other. And on August 23rd, 1934, Boylan sent a letter, which we call the Founder's Letter, to Lieutenant Francis about why they should form an organization made up of volunteers who own their own boats to help assist the Coast Guard. And he called it the Reserves. Lieutenant Francis loved the idea. He forwarded the letter up the chain of command, and it ended on the desk of, at the time in 1934, Commander Russell Wenatchee. By 1936, Wenatchee became the Commandant of the Coast Guard, became a Rear Admiral, and since he was the Commandant of the Coast Guard, he loved the idea of having a reserve. And so he and Boylan went to Congress and asked them to please help them, because there were over 300,000 pleasure crafts in the United States that were documented by the United States Coast Guard. That's the most pleasure crafts that they had ever had documented before. In addition, in 1938, they got 14,000 assistance calls from people who were boaters in trouble in all of the waters here around the United States and on the lakes and rivers. Of that, the Coast Guard was only able to help 8,600 souls in peril. A little bit more than half of the people who were in trouble. You see, the Coast Guard had over 120,000 miles of rivers, inland waterways, and coastline to patrol. And they only had about 17,000 people to do it with. So by June 23rd, 1939, Congress passed a law and Franklin D. Roosevelt signed it, and it created the Coast Guard Reserve, which was made up of volunteers who owned boats. And their main job was to provide recreational safe boating information and activities out. And that's our main job that we have is RSB, we call it, recreational safe boating activities. Now, the war was heating up in Europe. So by February 19th, 1941, everybody realized we were going to have to expand the military. And so the Coast Guard did not have a reserve. And so they decided to make the military reserve and then rename the auxiliary, the civilian component of volunteers, the auxiliary. In other words, the auxiliary was still non-paid employees during the war, as we are today. But the auxiliary provided a lot of help during the war. One of them was the auxiliary picket fleet, or as it was called, the Corsair fleet by Disney. And they were going out to recruit people, and Donald Duck got involved to help. The Coast Guard really liked the auxiliary sailboats, recreational vessels. They painted them. And the reason why they loved the sailboats, because at the time, the German submarines, the wolf packs, were just sinking all of the merchant ships as they were leaving the harbors of the United States on the East Coast. And so the picket fleet was put together to help hunt down the submarines. Of course, they were volunteers, they weren't military, so they didn't have guns officially. But what they did was they sailed the coast day and night, and they had hydrophones that they put in the water so they could hear the engines of the submarines. Now, the submarines couldn't hear the sailboats because they didn't have any boaters going. And if the submarines surfaced at night like they do to get air, their radar couldn't detect the sailboats because, well, they didn't have any metal. They were made out of wood. And so they spotted a lot of submarines. They would call that in to the station. The station would then notify the Navy Air Corps or the Army Air Corps, and they'd send out the planes to bomb the submarines. It became so effective that the German submarine wolf pack started to stay away from the coastline of the U.S. The United States Coast Guard Auxiliary on June 23rd, its birthday in 2003, will be celebrating 84 years, its anniversary. Now, what has been the average amount of things that the Coast Guard Auxiliary has done over its 84 years? Well, in an average year, they've saved over 365 lives a year. The boaters assisted on the water is over 10,222. Patrols that they've done is over 30,000 patrols. Safe boating classes, they've done over 38,000 safe boating classes. Vessel safety checks, they visited 161 boats to do vessel safety checks. And public affair events like what I'm doing right now, we do on average over 25,000 a year. This saves the taxpayer over $200 million. That would be additional money that you guys would have to spend as taxpayers to do the same thing if the Coast Guard Auxiliary were paid employees. We've cut the boating facility fatalities, by 46% because of our activities. During the pandemic, the Coast Guard Auxiliary was basically shut down, but boating activities went up and the death rates, the fatalities increased the corresponding amount of all the new people that were going out boating who didn't have our safe boating classes. We've cut that boating fatalities by 46% at a cost to each taxpayer of 1 penny per year. I think that's a pretty good deal. And now for a quick little video.
The auxiliary is a great way for people to give back to the community, give back to the services as well. We're volunteers, but we make a difference. We help out the active side in augmenting their forces, and we get to do jobs side by side with them and help them out.
A lot of support roles, from the aux chef program in the galley to the comms watchstander in the watch room. And then they're also a great asset for helping us train for our mission. Going out there to do as a safety platform and also giving us a different type of platform to train on and learn how to tow boats.
I would say there are so many opportunities within the Coast Guard Auxiliary to assist the Coast Guard. It's a volunteer organization, and we can do so many things aside from our contributions because we have such a wide, diverse background.
Aux Chef program's great. I mean, I've seen some magnificent food come from the auxiliary, some replica cakes of Coast Guard vessels, and then also just the quality of food is great. Every person that puts on the auxiliary uniform, is there to support the Coast Guard. And I think that's part of our strength is having the auxiliary force.
I say look into the different types of job opportunities, career opportunities that are available, and then choose wisely.
Other service organizations may offer you some interesting things to do, but the Coast Guard Auxiliary offers you possibly the most. But if you want to examine vessels, it's you to make sure that they have the right safety equipment. If you want to train people on how to be safe when they're out on their boats or their kayaks, if you want to be on a vessel and go out and make sure people are safe on the water, this is the organization for you.
Really appreciate what they do on a day-to-day basis. They are a force multiplier for the Coast Guard,
No, you need
with
to
the aviation
know.
or surface side. I think the auxiliary is going to continue to grow. I don't think the Coast Guard can do what we do without the auxiliary.
So think about joining. Well, what's the requirement? You have to have a minimum age of 17 or 14 if you're in the Sea Scouts. No upper age limit. My father was 80. He was still involved in the Coast Guard Auxiliary. He was no longer flying planes, but he was manning the ham radio for the Coast Guard. No physical requirements. That's why I'm able to join the Coast Guard Auxiliary, even though I have my heart situation. Must be a U.S. citizen. And if you want more information, get out your phone and scan the QR code, and it'll take you right to the website where you can get more information, where you can request additional information if you want it. And that's it. Stop sharing. And all I want to say is this last little bit, for some of you, this might be important if you're a veteran. If you're a veteran and you wear the Coast Guard Auxiliary uniform, the ribbons that you've earned while you were in the military, in the federal military, you may wear those along with your Coast Guard Auxiliary ribbons. These are just Coast Guard Auxiliary ribbons. All right, thank you very much. Sorry, I was out of uniform there for a second. Now I'm okay. All right. Thank you. And if you have any questions, now's the time to do it. I'm going to end the recording.